afternoon. Welcome to the UK Column News. It is the 25th of September 2014 and it's just gone 1 o'clock. Myself, Louise Collins, Brian Garish and Nick are here in the studio. And we have David Scott talking to us about Robert Greene in Scotland a little bit later. What's it doing then outside?
What's it doing outside? Well, it's pretty grey, but humid here in Plymouth, so it's okay. In Wales, winds of change are blowing, but there's a bit of sunshine, there's a few clouds, and we've also had a hot off the press report that in Scotland, or one area of Scotland at least, there's 20% blue sky and there's a light breeze, which is apparently pretty unusual, but we'll hear more from David Scott on that. Well, what better place to start today than the BBC? And we'd like to say a big thank you to the person who sent this through to us. They said, did you know that a gentleman called Tony Rook had won a court case against the BBC for their misreporting over 9/11 and the key issue of the collapse of World Trade Center Building 7? Now, we have only just come across this morning, but we think it's so important that we'd like to ask viewers and listeners to do research themselves. But it appears this gentleman has successfully won a court case against paying his licence because the BBC misreported the collapse of World Trade Center 7. If we just remind ourselves of this, the key thing was that we had BBC World here pushing out a report live on what was happening at the World Trade Center site. And this lady was saying the building had collapsed, where, surprise, surprise, it was still standing in the background. This leads Mr. Rook to believe that the BBC had prior knowledge of a terrorist act and were reporting with the intent to deceive the public. And it appears that his views on the BBC have been upheld in the court. Now, I think many people will be interested in this, so we're being a little bit cautious because we've only been able to pick up on it very quickly this morning, but we believe the court case is real. This presumably leaves the floodgates open for anybody who objects to paying their BBC licence, which is certainly a lot of people these days, and of course exposes the BBC once again as being a lying propaganda machine rather than the upstanding media organisation which it likes to portray. Just to show you the sheer hypocrisy of the BBC, we managed to catch this little clip off BBC Home, and of course anything to do with the collapse of buildings is conspiracy. Here are the conspiracy files. And they even choose to put a photograph of Building 7 collapsing in the background.
I wonder if they got anything about the tower structures that needed really to burn, which architects and engineers have proven would have needed to burn for days upon days before those towers could have come down. And the work of Judy Wood and Richard Gage of architecture engineers.
Well, we'll wait and see about that. Of course, the key issue is the collapse of a steel-structured building in a fire. I think David Scott, as an engineer, might have a couple of comments on that. We'll see. But there we are. Can we trust the BBC? Absolutely not. And of course, what they're putting out is very, very dangerous propaganda because as a result of the World Trade Center incidents, we've had draconian laws coming in America and Britain attempting to close down public freedoms. And of course, we've had the finger pointed at overseas terrorists and overseas nationalities and overseas religious groups as being the people responsible for this. BBC has done no proper investigative journalism to bring out the truth of the World Trade Center attacks.
Bearing in mind that's what Tony Blair was drumming the bangs of war for, and the murder of all those innocent Iraqis back in 2003 under the guise of 9/11 and weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
And of course we've got David "Our King" Cameron, Prime Minister of Britain, who's banging the same drums, isn't he, with getting people back in. Well, let's just move on. The subject, of course, is corruption in Britain's police force. And what better place to start is the fact that the police do not seem to want to investigate anything to do with child crimes.
No. Well, according to Ed Balls' wife, Yvette Cooper, Labour MP for Pontefract, the National Crime Agency has information of 25,000 people suspected of downloading indecent images of children. According to Ms Cooper, the NCA has only investigated and arrested 660 suspects. She then continued in her speech at the Labour Party conference to make swipes at Mrs May and plans for late night boozing, which we need to remember that was the genius idea of Tony Blair. But here we are, not enough people apparently are working on the case, and they don't have enough resources to follow up all the leads of suspected indecent images of children. Well, I suggest maybe they should start with the government and the Houses of Parliament, possibly.
Well, I think they should start there. No, possibly. And then we get more evidence coming forward. This is a Times political article here. Child sex inquiry into MP blocked by senior police. So this is Mick Creedon, Chief Constable of Derbyshire, told the Times that he was a detective sergeant in 1989 when he was ordered to limit his inquiries into the Grenville Janner leading Labour backbench MP. So Mr Creedon says there was credible evidence, but he was forbidden an arrest or a search of the gentleman's home or offices. So here we have very brave policemen and indeed women who are now coming forward simply to say that, well, it was senior officers that blocked the investigation into the abuse of children. And we're delighted to say that this particular story is making the rounds. So it's being tweeted out here, and this is really showing us the power of social media, that these things can be brought into the domain homes, faces of many people. So if you haven't picked up on this one, you might like to go and see the article yourself. And of course, if you agree with it, don't just send it to friends, send it to your local MP, send it to the Chief Constable of your local police. Let's get the crimes back in the faces of the people who are responsible for the cover-up. And what better example of a massive cover-up of the abuse of children than the Holly Gregg case, and of course Robert Green now spending his 128th day under house arrest for simply trying to get justice for abuse victim Holly Gregg, and of course help to protect other children. Now, against this background, and before we just bring in David Scott to tell us what's been happening with Robert, it's true to say, I think, that those people in Scotland who've been pushing for a national inquiry into child abuse, such as we've been promised in England. Well, we haven't quite seen the inquiry yet, but we have been promised it. But it appears that the Scottish establishment is desperately closing down any calls for an inquiry. So with that, I'll hand over to our guest, David Scott. Are you there, David?
Hi, David.
Hello. Hello, Lou. Hello, Brian.
Hello.
Well, we know you've got some comments and updates on Robert Green, and I understand he's been having an exchange of correspondence with Kenny McCaskill.
Yes. Just very briefly before we get to that, the comment you made just a moment ago about the national inquiry into child abuse, which has been organised by the Home Secretary, not applying in Scotland. Very few people in Scotland are actually aware of that. A friend of mine asked Kenny McCaskill directly about it, and I've asked questions to him in public meetings on this subject. And what we get is a whole stream of words which really doesn't add up to very much. Just, please look the other way. We're not really going to do anything, but we really don't want to be seen not to be doing anything. So at the moment, there is no investigation in Scotland. There's no equivalent of the Wolf inquiry happening here, and the person that's stopping it would appear to be Kenny McCaskill.
Which brings us straight into the exchange with Robert. Would it be helpful if I brought up, sorry, but it's better for you to set the scene. Tell us where the interaction with Kenny McCaskill happened, and then that has produced a transcript which I can then bring up on screen for you to read through or comment on.
Yes, this started back in April. Now, the background to this is Robert was about halfway through his 96 days in prison. And Kenny McCaskill came to town to tell us all to vote for Scottish independence and have an open meeting. So I went along, and my intention was to ask a question about the rule of law and use the Holly Gregg case to illustrate why the rule of law was not being applied equally in Scotland. People who were well connected and in the legal establishment and in things like the Fiscal's office were getting very, very light treatment, and Robert and Holly were not seeing anything that resembled justice. So I started to ask this question, and it was all going fine. And as soon as I mentioned the words Holly Gregg, the atmosphere changed immediately. About another sentence or two in, Mr. McCaskill cut me off and wouldn't actually take the question. But he said he would answer it, even though it wasn't asked. So when the time for his answer came, he launched into really quite a surprising attack on Robert Greene. He didn't name Robert by name, but he described the situation that it could only be Robert Greene. He described a person in custody at that point, in prison at that point, and launched into a whole series of comments about the Holly Gregg case and Robert Greene and related matters. I wasn't allowed to comment back, and that was the end of that. I didn't like what was said and wrote to Mr. McCaskill outlining my recollection of the meeting and what was said and my concerns over it. That email wasn't replied to. It seemed to have been deleted when it got to Mr. McCaskill's office. Some months later, I was still pursuing some sort of reply, and I made contact with a member of the Justice Directorate department under Mr. McCaskill, who assured me I would get a reply. So I did eventually get a reply to my email, and the reply said, in answering questions asked by you, the Cabinet Secretary did not comment on the charges against Mr. Greene, and indeed he noted the matter was sub judice. That did not come anywhere close to my recollection of the meeting. So I phoned up the chap who sent this letter, Mr. Ronnie Fraser, to share my thoughts on accuracy with him. And he said, well, that information's come from the transcript. And I said, what transcript? Did you get a transcript? I took it myself from the recording.
Sorry, we have a small problem there. I think what we'll do is I'll bring up on screen the transcript that David Scott's talking about, and perhaps Nick, we could do a reconnection there, see if we can clear that video error. Let's see. This is the actual letter that David Scott is talking about, and what I'll do is I'll read that through for our listeners while we're waiting for a reconnection. So this is Mr. McCaskill's reply to David Scott at the Perth Town Hall event. So Mr. McCaskill says, on Holly Gregg, we must be clear, it has been investigated. It was investigated by Grampian Police, went as high as the former Chief Constable, Colin McCracker. It has been reviewed by the past Lord Advocate, Dame Eilish Angelini. I know both of these individuals and hold them in the highest regard. Certainly Dame Eilish is an outstanding individual. The accusations made are false and without substance against various individuals, including serving sheriffs, and it is for that basis that a certain individual finds himself currently incarcerated in a prison not far from here. I have the hugest faith in Dame Eilish, in the service given by Colin McCracker. As in every justice system, there are occasionally things that go wrong. That is why we have spare systems built in terms of appeals. We have a review commission. But as I say, in terms of these two individuals, I find it's been quite scandalous that civil actions for her own protection, not just in terms of her good name, but her physical protection, as she has two young sons, have had to be taken by her. Dame Eilish Angelini is an outstanding individual who is a great Lord Advocate and is continuing, as we shall see, in terms of work that she's done in the Morton Hall baby ashes scandal and continues to do good work in this country. So David Scott then tried to make a reply, say he wasn't happy. Mr McCaskill finishes off by saying, no, we're not here to discuss Holly Greig. We're here to discuss Scottish Government's white paper and the referendum. I think that's quite clear. Never mind the fact that various aspects I've already mentioned are sub judice. Now, I think we should have David back, hopefully.
Me now.
Yes, we can.
Now, I've just read out and put on screen Mr McCaskill's reply. So take us through it if you can.
Yes, well, as I say, I was chasing a reply and I wasn't happy with what I initially got. And it then was revealed that Mr McCaskill had, in fact, had the meeting recorded. The audience wasn't told about this. Essentially, what Mr McCaskill did is he bugged his own public meeting. But that's transpired to be quite useful, is we've got this transcript. I don't think it's actually word perfect. I think there's a wee bit omitted here and there. But what's there is basically what happened. And it raises a whole series of interesting issues. But probably the best way to actually answer it is to read out Robert's reply. Robert Green has written to Mr McCaskill. And if the Skype link will stand the excitement, I'll just read what Robert has said to him. He says, I'm in receipt of a copy of the transcript from Mr Ronnie Fraser of the Justice Directorate. Although I understand certain statements made by you may have been edited out, there is enough in the transcript to indicate your unjustified and biased opinion towards me.
Screen. Sorry, David, to interrupt. We just want to bring it on screen.
Bring that letter on screen while you're reading it.
Okay. Indeed, your outrageous allegations that I have in some way threatened Elise Angelini and her family physically is absolutely disgraceful and has no basis whatsoever in fact. And I would point out that nor indeed can it, because that wouldn't be a civil matter, that would be a criminal matter. Nor has your ridiculous statement that Holly Greig's allegations of being sexually abused are false, which transparently flies in the face of all the documentary evidence provided by acknowledged experts, including police officers. Indeed, as you well know, D.I. Alley of Grampian Police, in a letter to the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority, described Holly as a truthful witness and an entirely innocent victim. You must acknowledge that neither you nor Elise Angelini have ever met Holly Greig. And there is absolutely no evidence that either of you have the slightest professional qualifications that could reasonably allow you to dismiss the independent opinions supporting Holly of Dr. Francis Kelly, Dr. Eva Harding, Dr. Jack Boyle, Dr. Paul Carter, Ruth Beckman and Susanna Seaman of the Down Syndrome Association, Specialist Solicitor Nicola Smith of Enable, D.I. Alley and fellow police officers at Grampian, and the entire panel of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority. Your comments about me and your reference to a matter admitted by you as sub judice is disgraceful, coming from a man in your position. With your earlier mention of the Holly Greig case and the reference to my incarceration on remand in Perth Prison, this could only be interpreted by a reasonable person following this much publicised case as being me. Clearly, this remark and your whole discriminatory attitude gives me reason to believe that I cannot possibly be given a fair trial in Scotland. Of course, as a man of peace and nominee for the Nobel Peace Prize, it leads me to believe that your public remarks linked to Elise Angelini are slanderous and therefore actionable. I regard them as a baseless slur on my reputation. I call on you to publicly retract these remarks within 14 days of receipt of this letter and offer an apology to me in line with the request to do so by my MP, Mr. David Mowat. Yours sincerely, Robert Green. And I think that puts it beautifully.
Okay, we'll just bring the end of his letter on the screen if you can, Nick. That's it. There we are. So we just took the last paragraph. Okay, we come back to David. That'd be good.
So we have Mr. McCaskill standing up in a public meeting, misstating hugely the facts of the case, saying the allegations are false, which is something I mean, I don't know where he got that from. There is no credible suggestion from any source that the allegations are false. The Crown Office is saying there's insufficient evidence, insufficient admissible evidence to secure a prosecution. Nobody from the Crown Office is saying anything about the allegations being false. And he then launches into this attack on Robert Greene, suggesting that he's some sort of violent thug. Again, this has come from we've no idea what source. It's just made up on the spot, it would seem. Well, this is a trained lawyer and the Justice Secretary of the nation. It's really not good enough by a country mile.
It seems to me that maybe this is the action of a man who was frightened, basically, caught rabbit in the headlights at a public meeting. He's asked a very difficult question and he starts talking and his mind runs away with him. But yes, your point is absolutely correct. What business had he saying these things publicly? And of course, the other great lie in this story is that Grampian Police investigated. All of the evidence shows, and it was revealed in Robert's court case, I think I'm correct in stating, that Grampian Police did not investigate the case. No investigation equates to no evidence or insufficient evidence, and hey presto, there's nothing of substance that the prosecution service can bring into court. So it's a self-fulfilling lie, isn't it, David?
Well, essentially there's no evidence if you refuse to look. There will never be any evidence. The second investigation by Grampian Police, which only happened after Robert had pressed very, very hard and personally directed a few statements towards the Chief Constable in terms of his personal responsibility in the matter. When the second investigation came down, they still hadn't learned anything from the first. They didn't interview Hawley properly. There should have been expert support there during the interview, but there wasn't. There was nobody. There was no specialist in dealing with Down syndrome. There was nobody there to help interpret what Hawley was saying. It was not a competent interview of someone in Hawley's position, and that was their third attempt at interviewing Hawley. So it wasn't really getting any better.
David,
Sorry,
how many people were interviewed by police who Hawley had originally named? Were many people investigated and spoken to by the police after Hawley made the allegations?
No. Hawley has accused 23 people. 22 names have been passed to the police. Of those 22, 20 have not been interviewed about the matter at all in any way, and 2 seem to have had a very brief interview at some point that was perhaps relating to the issue, but nothing that would qualify as a thorough investigation.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, David, we're going to thank you very much for that very interesting update. We know that people are watching with great interest in the chat box, and this kind of information I think is priceless because it's real, it's factual, and we're now putting it out in the public domain. So thanks for joining us. We'll be happy to have any further updates that you may have on Robert Greene and the Holly Greig abuse case.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, that probably brings us nicely into what happens south of the border to child abuse victims and whistleblowers. And it does now finally seem that there's some interest in the mainstream press and media about Melanie Shaw.
See how brave they are, though, eh?
We'll see. They're sniffing round at the moment, asking questions. What's actually happening to Melanie Shaw? What evidence have you got? Now, we've dealt with all this sort of thing many times before. In come the mainstream press reporters. They're all very professional. They are the professionals doing the job. They want all the information, and then very often, most of the time, what then happens is a wall of silence. And of course, it was ITN themselves that started to get great interest with Oxford and Cherwell Valley College abuses. And then once evidence had been passed over, that was documentary evidence, that was witness statements, all of a sudden a stunning silence.
I think the Mirror were quite brave, the Sunday Mirror and also Sunday Express, with talking with regards to Chris Fay and Bill Maloney. They did go and do some interviews and were brave enough to report that.
Well, we'll see how it goes. Let's just recap on Melanie. She's still there, sitting in prison while we're going about our daily lives. We just wanted to remind people that Melanie is not in prison because of the actions of organisations. She's in prison because of the actions of individuals. So top of the bill must be Chris Eyre, Chief Constable for Nottinghamshire Police. It's his police force which arrested Melanie on negligent arson and criminal damage charges. He wasn't able to produce enough evidence. But surprise, surprise, Alison Saunders, Crown Prosecution Service, was happy to take this very vulnerable child abuse victim into court. So this lady really needs protection because she's a whistleblower as well. But with, according to the public who were present in the case, no real evidence against her. What happens? Well, this Judge Geoffrey Dickinson, puts her in prison on remand, and she's now on her 62nd day today. But this man's also got a finger in the pie, John Collins, leader of Nottingham City Council, because it was his Children's Services Department that, of course, were running Beechwood Children's Home in the first place. But once the whistleblowers like Melanie and Mickey Summers came forward, then, of course, it's his department that should be protecting these vulnerable people at all levels, and that includes in relations with the police. Well, the local CPS certainly can't get away with it because it must surely be this gentleman, Steve Chappell, Chief Crown Prosecutor for CPS East Midlands, who would have made, we presume, would have made the final decision that they were going to press charges against Melanie. And then we have individuals like this gentleman, Chris Leslie. This is Melanie's MP. He is so concerned about the fact that she has been imprisoned. He's so concerned that over 90, it's probably near 100 youngsters were abused at Beechwood Children's Home in Nottinghamshire, and another 12 children homes are apparently now being investigated under Operation Daybreak.
Melanie triggered.
Well, he's so concerned about her predicament that he has done nothing tangible, but he was happy to run off to the Labour conference to sit clapping as the great and the good took to the stage. So it's pretty disgusting, really.
It is pretty disgusting. The page for Melanie, the UK column Melanie Shaw official group, is running fantastically. I've got to say a huge thanks to Lordy, Azra, Wendy and everybody, and Michael, all working tirelessly on there. And there is a group, there is an event set up there. It is for a vigil outside the prison on Sunday the 5th from 11 o'clock. The details are on the group. Please go in there and have a look. And I'll just say one thing, that no trolls are invited there. If you've seen any trolls and disruptors on there, you're going to be kicked out.
It's very interesting, isn't it, that we're seeing same sort of trouble appear around this case as appeared around the Holly Gregg case.
Yeah.
To us, it's a clear sign that the establishment exceptionally worried about the fact the public are now supporting Melanie Shaw. We are going to stay supporting her. And of course, the objective is to get Melanie out of prison so that she can stand by her evidence to the abuse of children. And indeed, Melanie's statement is that children were murdered at Beechwood Home, Nottinghamshire. And she has also stated categorically that Nottinghamshire Police have revealed that they have simply not been doing their job in investigating.
Can I just quickly just continue with Melanie for a second? When was it that she came down to see? She came down, didn't she? And you spoke to her originally.
It would have been 2 weeks before the 25th of July.
And that's when she went into prison.
Yes.
So, and Brian is being in constant contact with her. No news today, though?
We have no news today.
Okay.
We will continue to push out information as and when we've got it. We do believe that another bail application is going to be made very shortly. We're keeping an eye on that to see whether the law firm now connected with that case is going to do their job. We will see.
Yeah, they
But
are
of
messing
course,
around with the medication though as well. That was
she's
from
still
last
getting a
year.
terrible time in Sodexo, Prison HM, Prison Peterborough.
Yeah.
And if you feel unhappy about that, the man to question is MP Solus, or Solu, Selous, and he is the Minister for Prisons, but his own staff appear unsure as to whether he still has responsibility for prisoners held in private prisons in UK.
So please keep twittering, Facebooking and doing what you can to raise awareness for Melanie Shaw. Letters and documents are all on that page, the group page, the UK Columns page for Melanie. The guys have been working so hard. There's letters to MPs, letters to news agencies, everything that you need on that page to raise awareness. So keep it up, guys who are looking after that page. Thank you so much.
And remember, you can email her via the website emailaprisoner.com. So that's
all the
another
info
way.
is there as well, and the address and Melanie's prisoner number.
So children being attacked across the country, and you're looking at this business with universities
This
again.
is shocking. Cardiff University and the freshers who are just starting there are being handed out sex tally charts. Climax Promotions, who are based in Cardiff, last year actually promoted a T-shirt with a quote saying, "I was raping a woman last night and she cried." So this is a delightful little company. Apparently now Cardiff University are looking to ban this Climax Promotions from the campus site. But here's the little shag chart that these guys have produced and have been handing out to the freshers. There you go. Name, who you're up to it with it, and what's the story behind it. So lovely little company there promoting this. And then only the other day we had this article in the Telegraph. Don't forget the female orgasm. Sisters are handing out orgasm guides for women, young girls, women who are attending, again, freshers at university. These ladies have come up with a genius idea on this guide for female orgasms. So it's completely promoting
If we bring the thing back to individuals, of course, it's the Chancellor of the university who's allowing this to happen. Mm-hmm. So what action is he taking?
Yeah, exactly.
What are the police good at? Well, of course, the police are good at terror raids. So we're very interested in this Mail headline here. Radical preacher Anjem Choudhury is one of 9 men arrested in terror raid in London. I think there's some substance in this, that basically the police are carrying out terror raids. I think that's pretty sure. Isn't it amazing that the police know absolutely what's happening in the murky world of overseas policy? They know who all the terrorist groups are. They know their names. They know how they're linked. They can make arrests. But the one area that British police can't seem to make any progress is penetrating the paedophile rings, which are clearly connected with politicians in Westminster and the great and good in the establishment. Well, we thought we might have a bit of a clue to this. Let's go back to the case of Ian Puddick. Now, I'm sure many people remember that Ian was the man running a big plumbing company up in London. His wife had an affair. He sent some fairly innocent emails. And to cut a long story short, he ends up with his business and home raided by City of London police. They were using anti-terrorism assets. Quite clearly, this man is an international terrorist. And they then tried to fit him up with drugs. And ultimately, even the judge in the court case said he'd never seen anything quite like it. Now, Ian reminded us today that this was a document sent out by City of London Police, and basically it's a media briefing document. So it's saying what they should and should not say if they get inquiries. So here, for example, call from a Daily Mail journalist wanting to know whether we're planning to release the cost of the Puddick investigation. She states that Puddick has published on his website that Nick Herbert has demanded that the cost of the police investigation is revealed. So they anticipate the questions, they suggest what the answers are, but we just wanted to bring your attention back to this one. So, question, why was this handled, i.e. the Puddick case, why was this handled by the Forces Murder Squad? Why was anti-terror legislation used? So what do City of London Police say? Well, it's in this section here. At no point was counter-terror legislation used in this investigation. The investigation was run by the force's major investigation team, which, while set up primarily to deal with major crime, occasionally deals with cases outside of this remit to relieve pressure on other departments within the force. The major investigation team sits within the Serious Crime and Counter-Terrorism Directorate. So we didn't really use anti-terrorism capability. We just happened to use a team that just happened to sit within the Serious Crime and Counter-Terrorism Directorate. Well, you can see a lot of this stuff on Ian Puddick's website talking about this case. And what you begin to see, of course, is the police using a very slick media system in order to essentially lie and cover up the trail. We thought this morning we'd have a little bit of a look into the City of London Police. Now, this is the existing Police Commissioner, Adrian Leppard. He was not actually the man in post, I think I'm correct in saying, when the Ian Puddick case was at its height. But nevertheless, it's very interesting to take a look at the City of London Police. What are they about? Well, never mind £1 million operation to arrest a plumber and raid his businesses. They're all about stopping people putting their hands in your handbag. So trust us, because we're looking after residents and bicycle theft, and we're really quite nice people. Well, here's the man and his CV. I know the print's a bit small, but it's fascinating that we've got a man who says that he's done a lot in major crimes, serious contract killings, and the world's largest cash robbery of 53 million. But he's done a master's degree in business and administration with the City University in London. He looks after the Square Mile. He's involved with the National Fraud Office, the Economic Crime Directorate, and it says that basically the City of London Police supports the government's Economic Crime Command within the National Crime Agency. He's also got a passion for paragliding, and he's been up Mount Kilimanjaro to throw himself off in an attempt to fly from the summit. So presumably he did that because he seems to be alive and well. But get into this unique police force, and of course what comes up straight away is money making. Here's the corporate services, and this gentleman, Eric Nesbitt, who's a chartered member of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants. We've got lots of information about his role within corporate services. So as a director of corporate services, Mr. Nesbitt holds the force's highest police staff post and is responsible for key business areas, including finance and technology. An important part of his role is to better link the skills and services across the corporate services with the strategic priorities of the City of London Police. But moreover, we're fascinated to see that he's also mentioned here, police forces across the UK have been tasked with a national objective that police staff and officers should work more closely together. And these objectives are set out in the government agenda, such as the National Police Reform and Competency Framework. So he's involved in the change of the police. If you have a look at this CV, read it for yourself. And this is our question: what is the City of London Police changing from, and what is it changing to? Well, perhaps the clue is when you have a look at how they're set up. And in this paragraph here, we see that the City of London Corporation is the organisation that supports and promotes the Square Mile. It maintains its heritage through a variety of local government, non-local government functions, making it unique. The City of London Corporation is run through the Court of Common Council, and that's presided over by the Lord Mayor. And essentially, this is the team that then runs the City of London Police. So you might like to go and have a look at this amazingly introverted organisation, which runs its own police force, which are happy to spend about £1 million and employ anti-terror squads in order to arrest a gentleman who was essentially in a civil dispute with somebody having an affair with his wife. This is pretty dangerous stuff, and you can see how, of course, if that's the position of a private police force in the City of London, that once we get into the Met Police and private companies like ACPO, or indeed Police Scotland, they're not investigating the single crime that would take the lid off the paedophiles who are now governing us.
Can I just, before we go on to the next story, I just want to jump back. There's a bit of shock about the Daily Mail story about Climax Promotions, and someone was very shocked when I read out what that company were promoting last year about the rape T-shirt. Guys, we just want to show you what's going on with regards to our kids when they're leaving home to go into schools, and these are the kind of things that are being handed out in schools. And go and read the Daily Mail article, maybe get in touch with Climax Promotions in Cardiff and see what they're playing at and what their motive is behind supplying these things to schools.
Just one more for me, and I'll hand over because I know you're keen on the pay rises. Well, of course, we had David Cameron's face in the media yesterday because he was crowing that the Queen had been purring over the success of the referendum. Different story here in The Independent, because now it appears that David Cameron's had to apologise for leaking the Queen's opinion to the general public. I think there's a media scam going on here, and what this scam is about is to fool the public into thinking the Queen supports the United Kingdom, when in fact she's accepted mediatisation with the EU, which means she's given away her powers as a sovereign in order to retain her wealth and privileges. But of course, none of the mainstream media, including The Independent, even know about this, or they simply choose not to report about it.
What was her pay rise last year? I can't recall. Was it 22%?
I don't know. It was quite big. I know that quite often she's lying in bed stressed, wondering how she can spend so much money. That must be tricky. Yeah. But anyway, pay rises for the boys.
All right. Nurses are going to hold a 4-hour walkout at 7 o'clock in the morning on Monday, the 13th of October, over the rejection of the recommended pay rise of 1%, by the rejection of it by Jeremy Hunt. According to Unison, 300,000 members voted for strike action. They say members have had enough of Hunt's treatment, and NHS staff pay has actually, in reality, been cut by 20% under this coalition government. So let's just go and remind ourselves what a story came out on the 7th of September of this year. There you go, 9% pay rise for the MPs.
Well,
and that's looking to go ahead.
This is the elite. This is Tony Blair's class of elites. They're not interested in what's happening.
Boil, Brian.
That's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make you angry. And of course, the ultimate objective is to destroy the NHS.
Yep. And then here is the man
Mr. Hunt,
who's refused to let the nurses and frontline staff who are out there helping people every day their 1% pay rise. But hey-ho, he's laughing all the way to the bank because he's going to be guaranteed to pick up his 9%, plus his expenses, plus his housing expenses, his subsidised lunches and dinners and no doubt travel. Sorry, Brian, I'm really wound up by this gentleman, creature.
It's great to be wound up. It's get that energy focused towards these people, exposing them for what they are. Don't rant and complain to your friends. No. The art is to get your complaint in the faces of these people. Mm-hmm. Keep it measured, keep it blunt, keep on the trail. And of course, what are they all frightened of? Losing their seats at the next election. Yeah. So that's one thing you can do. Or we could vaccinate them, of course.
If all else fails. OK, so over 200 girls fell ill after receiving the HPV vaccine in Colombia. But over in this country, and I just want to remind people of what is in the vaccine for HPV, the Gardasil vaccine that our government in this country wants our girls to be having from the age of approximately 12 to around 14. They want to be injecting our children with aluminium hydroxide, amino acids, amongst other things. Good thing though, there's no mercury in this one, it seems, but they're still going to be having aluminium and other things being injected into them. And then we need to remind each other this story the other day of, hey-ho, remind me when boys got cervix. I can't recall. Brian, do you have a cervix?
Well, what's going on here? I don't know.
No. But this is what's
really don't know.
But we are having more and more evidence coming through about what and the dangers of this HPV vaccine. But we are now deciding to inject our boys with this vaccine, and I saw a fantastic poster the other day, and I had to grab it. Brian, can you put this on? There you go. That's all from me. I'm angry enough. Stop.
It's understanding that the destruction we see around us is organised. What can we do about it? Well, this is one example. Of course, if you want war, you're going to be voting for David Cameron. But this is an example of an email that somebody sent to their local MP. And remember that it was these sorts of emails that were able to stop the last attack on Syria. So, dear Dr. Philip Lee, as one of your constituents, I'm writing to you to tell you I disagree with the bombing of Syria. It is illegal for a country to bomb another when they have not been, I think that should be not made an attack. You'll only be killing innocent men, women and children. There's been enough killing. If a vote's called for by Mr. David Cameron in the House of Commons, as your constituents, I ask you to please vote no. I wish no bombing to be done in my name. Now, one email, of course, has not a lot of effect. A million emails has a lot of effect. So at the end of the day, King Cameron, that's what he thinks he is, the king of the country. Of course, he's pledged his support not to Britain, Scotland, England, Wales or Ireland. He's pledged his undying support to Israel. But if you want to bring this man to book, we have to pump the information out there.
And Tony Blair's still walking around scot-free without being held.
At the moment, but I don't think he probably sleeps too well.
Let's hope not.
Okay, well,
okay. Can I just say, sorry,
you can,
I'm sorry, I'm
quick.
still bubbling. Okay, leaflets, bumper stickers, T-shirts, and please tell your friends about us. The only way we stay on air without telethons or anything else is by you guys' support and getting new members in. So please invite your friends to subscribe to the ukcolumn.org. And remember the conference 1st of November and the 2nd of November for health. Dr. Graham Downing and the British Constitution Group at event at the Ramada Hotel, Birmingham.
And we'll just say that Mike Robinson is particularly busy as we speak on the next edition of the UK column, which will be a bumper edition, I think I'm correct in saying. There are some amazing things that we are going to bring out in that edition. So if you haven't taken the UK column before and you feel you can, perhaps you've taken this subscription with us.
And Malcolm's going to be away from his food tomorrow to join us, to present the show with Brian tomorrow.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Well, I'll be sad to lose you, Louise, but we'll
I'll be back
welcome
Tuesday.
young Malcolm. Okay, thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.